Morning, Miss Perdue.
Good morning, Mr. Davis.
Ready to build that new barn, I suppose?
No, sir. We have more pressing matters to discuss.
Oh? What's that?
We're engaged to be married.
And she's already picked the house out of the Sears Robux catalog.
Well, all right then. Come inside.
And so it began. A simple bank ledger, journaling the transactions of life in Willards, Maryland. Weddings and births, new houses, barns and farm equipment, growing families, and businesses big and small. Like any rural town in 1925, the lifeline of Willards was the railroad. They needed it for daily commerce, and daily commerce needed a bank.
In the early days, the closest bank to Willards was in Berlin, and you had to take a train to Berlin or take your horse. The next closest bank was in Salisbury, and they didn't bother to take the 2-hour trip to go to Salisbury on horse. If you had a car, you were rich. It was a very, very long day to go to Salisbury and back just to put money into a bank in downtown Salisbury.
On August 1st of 1924, my great-grandfather, Samuel E. Shockley, met in Willards with a small group of men to determine the advisability of opening a bank in Willards, Maryland. My great-grandfather was elected chairman of that meeting.
And they wanted to build a bank that could be used by the common man. So they met in the summer of 1924, and then by January, they were ready to open the doors of the bank.
A small brick building that was sitting in the center of town, an agricultural environment.
Put yourself in their shoes. A train comes through town, there's horses and buggies, and the only way that they could allocate capital through this area of Wycomico County was to build a bank. It's an audacious goal, and to them I would say thank you for being so brave.
This area was very humble. They lived very modest lives, and if you had a dollar, you really had something valuable.
My family was involved in agriculture. They also had a general store where they sold everything from gasoline to flour, most anything anybody would need.
I remember some of the old timers telling me if you found a penny, a nickel, a dime, people would be able to buy a rake or a bushel basket. To borrow money was kind of a sin.
The founding board knew well what a bank could do for such a remote area of the county. They also knew if the bank was to succeed, they would need a cashier the people of Willards would trust. On October 27, 1924, before the bank was even built, the board hired a young Willards man named Ebenezer Davis to be the first cashier.
At the time, the cashier was what we call the president of the bank today. He ran the day-to-day operations of the bank. And admittedly, it wasn't a very big bank at the time, but he was the secretary to the board. He ran the day-to-day operations of the bank. He met with every single customer face-to-face. And the first week, they had about $6,000 deposited in the bank. By the second month, they had $12,000, which for this area at that time was a tremendous amount of money. And it showed that people had been hiding their money in coffee cans and change purses and that kind of stuff.
It's ironic that folks decided to bury their money. Their money was dead, and the community bank was able to resurrect those funds to be able to reinvest in the communities.
Slowly, the culture around borrowing began to change, and a tide of stagnant money started flowing.
There are loans that we have record of, and we were making loans of $200. We were making loans of $500.
The advent of a community bank filled that void of folks who wanted a place to keep their money safe and those who needed access to capital.
If somebody was building a house, buying a tractor, buying another acre of land that adjoined their acre of land,
the community bank is largely responsible for the growth of rural America.
But just 4 years after the Farmers Bank opened, the New York Stock Exchange crashed and signaled the Great Depression. Global industries screeched to a halt. But in Willards, there was no global industry. Crops kept growing and hens kept laying.
In 1929, you have to just think that it was very country, it was very small.
This bank weathered the storm of the Great Depression with flying colors.
The world to us was very small. The Chesapeake Bay to our west did not have a bridge coming across it, so we were in our own little world.
People didn't have much, but what they did is they engaged in the barter system. People bartered with eggs, corn, anything you can think of, people would trade, and they didn't really need the bank from a borrowing standpoint. And they allowed that barter system from, say, 1929 to 1934 to rule the economy here on Delmarva.
For those years, money was scarce in Willards. Nevertheless, people continued to save what little they had and strive for the American dream.
The most poignant story from the Great Depression really came from my grandfather. He had to scrape and work through the 20s, got married, and decided in 1934 that he had saved enough money to have a house.
My father was working at a local shirt factory that was about 50 yards from the home that he bought, and he was a machinist that kept 100 sewing machines running because there was approximately 100 ladies who were making shirts for a company that had several small such factories in all the little towns here on the Eastern Shore. Willards was being one of them. My father was making 10 cents an hour, working 10 hours a day, making $1 a day, $5 a week. He had managed to save $500.
It was going to cost $1,000 to build the house. There was only one place he could go, and that was Mr. Ebenezer Davis. And when he went to Mr. Davis, they were taking a chance on the local person, who was Aubrey Davis. And if you read the minutes of the meeting, it doesn't even have my grandmother's name. It just says Aubrey Davis and wife.
He was 2 years into marriage and ready to buy a home and eventually start a family, which was later on me.
At that time, it was such a big deal to build a house in Willards that you were being trusted almost with your honor. It was a big deal for you to be able to get a loan in 1935.
Times were tough, but he saved his money. He's a classic example of what the bank was doing during that period of time.
Now, it's important to note that although Ebenezer Davis and Aubrey Davis shared a common name, the two men were not directly related. And for Aubrey, this meeting at the bank may be the moment marking the beginning of a legacy that would extend 4 generations into Aubrey's future. A story that hangs on a twist of fate that no one saw coming.
Ebenezer Davis died at 41 years old. And so the board of directors at that point didn't have a lot of college graduates to choose from here in Willards, Maryland. So they came and asked my grandfather if he would take over as cashier of the bank. He was a trusted man in the community, and that's officially when the Davis family started in the banking world in 1939.
But in September of that same year, Germany invaded Poland and marked the start of World War II. The Farmers' Bank and the town was growing again, but for the men of Willards, the war threatened to derail their dreams of a quiet family life. And for Aubrey, it would take another twist of fate.
People went into a lottery in Willards to determine whether or not they were going to have to go into the military. He was almost drafted into World War II, but because he had a son, which was Frank Davis, my father, they took the other person, who ended up having to go serve.
In the years after the war, America was in its heyday. Small towns like Willards weren't just growing, they were thriving.
My father happened to be born in 1940, and as he describes it, it was kind of a Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer type lifestyle that was really idyllic.
When we would get home from school, we would eat dinner, then we would go visit. Everybody knew who everybody was. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad.
On a Friday, when my mom would bring us down here on a Friday, the entire lobby of that bank was full of people.
We worked 10 to 2 on Fridays. At 5 o'clock, we reopened after having a break, and we stayed open till 8 o'clock.
Looking back on it now as an adult, I see that was like a social hour here. People were just talking about anything and everything, from whether their crops had done well that year and whether their mother was sick or not, and who was building a new house, who was getting married, who was having children. It was like a social hour every Friday because that's when people got paid. People got paid on Fridays, and they ended up at the Farmers Bank because the bank would close at 2 o'clock and then reopen later at 4 o'clock and stay open until 8 o'clock every Friday so people could cash their paycheck. Because that's what people did then, they cashed their paycheck. So it was more than just what we consider banking today. It was the social gathering place for people here in Willards, particularly during the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s.
By the mid-60s, the town had outgrown their tiny bank, so the board decided to build a bigger bank on the same site.
My grandfather was still here when the bank was built, and my sister and I went across the street. My mom brought us across the street to what was the IGA at the time, and we watched the claw of that crane tear down the bricks of the original bank that was built in 1925 in favor of the sparkling new 1966 bank that had a drive-through. You know, it had a nice lobby with terrazzo floors and marble countertops and a big steel vault with safe deposit boxes in it. It was just a complete renovation for the town. It was a beautiful building at the time too, and I think the public, including my parents, my grandparents, were very proud. The town of Willards was very proud to see that new bank built in 1966.
Oh, we were just proud peacocks, and all of us had, I think, hair pieces in our head. Unfortunately, Chris Davis has always loved this picture, but it was Pearl Richardson, Catherine Ennis, Alice Lee Harmon, Gloria Wainwright, myself, and Janet Murray. We looked like airline stewardesses, and we were called the Beehive Girls. This was one of the earliest times when we had uniforms.
T-minus one, ignition. Liftoff.
Hairstyles reached for the sky. Automobiles looked as though they could break the sound barrier just parked in the driveway. America was pioneering the space age, but it would be another 2 decades for that technology to change the daily operation of banking.
Every quarter, we would have to calculate the CD interest by hand. The savings was the same way. Quarterly, there was a machine that calculated the interest on it, and the ledger sheets you had to put in the machine and it would post it on there. Same way with bookkeeping every day. And they did not have account numbers. You had to look at the signature. So you learned to recognize the people's signature. When we went to the first computer system, it was enlightening, I have to say. I'm going to say late 80s. It was completely different from what we had been used to. Number one, to use a mouse.
The biggest change of banking since I took over was a cell phone. The ability to have in your hand a computer that mimics the same computing power that they had when man went to the moon in 1969. And to be able to have a wireless device and do all of your digital banking the way people did it through legacy channels of banking is by far the biggest change we've ever had, by far.
Anytime you're looking at implementing new technology, it's a crawl, walk, run type mentality. One of the things I'm most excited to bring to the marketplace is the introduction of artificial intelligence to the workforce. Anytime you're trying something new, you have to be careful. But if you think about the companies that are still around, it's the ones that were able to innovate and adapt the quickest. Think of a company like Kodak. It used to be one of the largest companies in the world, and they no longer exist. We don't want to be like Kodak. We want to be more nimble.
Banking will always be about people. It will not be about machines, computers, cell phones. It will always be about people. So as we move forward into the future of the Farmers Bank of Willards, we always have to remember that people come first.
That foundational tenet was never more important than when the bank found itself in the depths of its first real crisis in nearly 100 years.
The worst time for the Farmers Bank was not in the Depression era of the 1930s. It was in what is normally now referred to as the Great Recession of 2007, 8, 9, 10, and 11.
It was hard times. Our loan-to-deposit ratio was high.
Every bank practically in the country was either losing money, showing a net loss, or they were having a lot of charge-offs because people could not pay. People were losing jobs, unemployment went through the roof, and if they were relying on a two-income household and either the wife or the husband lost their job.
I said, Chris, we only have one way to go, and that was to make it better.
If we had people who were in financial difficulties, we did everything that we could to work with those people, make extensions to loans that they needed the time. We tried to avoid foreclosing.
We were good to the customers, I believe. And I told him, I said, it will turn around.
I've said this to both of my sons and will continue to say it to the future boards of this bank. Don't put money first. Put the customer first. If you put the customer first, the money and success of the bank will come.
The bank was never in the red. Some banks across the country actually lost money. The Farmers Bank of Willards was always in the black. It got very low.
If you think about why a community bank exists, the top priority is to ensure that you are investing in your community first. Our company and many community banks around the country also have shareholders. And if you're doing it right, you're first able to reinvest in your community in the form of loans to your customers. At the end of the day, you try to have a little bit of money left over that you can return it to your shareholders.
Farmers Bank has been able to pay a dividend every year, except that dark time, there was not any money to pay a dividend. Stockholders didn't like it, but they recognized the dilemma.
This too shall pass.
Because the world changes so rapidly, I think there's certain principles that are universal, and one of those is humility. Stay humble, be thankful, and serve others. If you can do those three things every day, you're going to win and be successful.
When people are having good times, we rejoice with them. When they're having bad times, we are sympathetic to whatever they're going through. And I feel like that is a family.
The Farmers Bank had taken a simple platitude to treat customers like family and embraced it. They practiced it and drew strength from it to maintain balance on the brink of disaster. It's not surprising then that the employees of the Farmers Bank, unified in their mission, would treat each other the same way.
It sounds corny, but the bank was a family of people.
The employees at the bank became family.
It was an atmosphere you enjoyed being at the bank. Your interaction with your fellow employees made it a family.
It's an exciting place to come to work every day. We have an incredibly talented staff who deeply cares about our customers.
But I know one time, you wanted to tell us about it? We told Frank that he had a phone call and that it was either Mr. Bear or Mr. Fox. And we wrote the number down to the Salisbury Zoo. And when he got back, he called the Salisbury Zoo and asked for Mr. Bear. He immediately came out front to all of us and said, "Who did this?"
The bank certainly had a way of bringing people together. Aubrey Davis wasn't the only one who felt the tug of fate pulling them to make a life at the bank, even when those people had other ambitions.
As a teenager, I actually worked a little bit in the summer at the bank before going away to college.
Aubrey Davis, who was Frank Davis's father, came to my door and asked me if I would like a job. That was in 1969.
After 44 years, when my father decided that it was time to resign from his position at the board, he wanted one of his children to come on the board. That doesn't always happen, but I was the one that was chosen, much to my surprise, being a woman. I had young children. My grandmother babysat for my children, so I could go to these directors' meetings.
In the year of 1965, I was in public accounting, and the board of directors of the Farmers Bank decided that they needed to add an additional employee. So I decided to make the change from accountant to banker.
When I was a little boy and I would run around the Farmers Bank of Willards, the furthest thing from my mind was that I would ever work for the Farmers Bank of Willards. If anything, I thought, I'm going to forge my own path here. And I ended up going to Wake Forest University School of Law and becoming a lawyer. Little did I know that fate would swing things back around and I would become the president of the bank in 2002.
A childhood memory, a chance encounter. Fate is difficult to discern in the moment, but over time, those moments gather weight, forging paths in ways that no one can predict, beginning as happenstance and over generations, revealing something more, a legacy.
In 1969, my grandfather passed away, singing at the local church here in Willards on November 23rd, 1969. He was only 56 years old. And so that was kind of a blow, not only to our family, but obviously to to the town because they were losing their cashier.
And because of only 4 years of banking experience, there was a new CEO that was brought into the bank.
And a man named Walden Wooden came in 1970 and took over as the cashier of the bank.
I remained as a teller and an assistant cashier.
Mr. Wooden was a kind, gentle person who didn't ever say a mean word to anyone. People really grew to trust Mr. Wooden. He had a nice family himself. He was here from 1970 until 1983 when he passed away. That's when my father, in his early 40s at the time, became the president of the bank.
I had been at the bank since 1965, and I was made cashier.
When I was 34 years old, I was asked to serve on the board of directors of the bank. I was a lawyer practicing law in Salisbury, and they wanted a younger director who had a connection to Salisbury because the bank really needed to consider expanding its footprint into the Salisbury market and perhaps later into Ocean City. And at the time, I was asked to serve on the board. There was in the back of some people's minds, I didn't know that they may want me to serve as president when Dad retired. Because I had an accounting degree, I had a law degree, I had an economics degree, it would make sense. And I think it was also an easy way out for them because they knew me.
And I remained president until 2003 when I retired.
Looking back on it, no one actually got the next job of president until somebody died. They had not even thought about who would replace them. And my father broke that trend. So yeah, it was the first time we ever had any succession planning.
I have worked with 4 generations of the Davises.
It's humbling to think that my grandfather started here in 1939. My father started here in the 60s. I started here in 2002. And then both of my sons ended up being here, one in marketing, one as the next president of the bank.
There's only 32 chartered banks left in the state of Maryland, and it's an honor to be able to carry this torch for FBW. I also feel really lucky to have such a supportive board of directors.
There was a couple people that came up to me recently and said, how can we have another Davis be the president of the Farmers Bank of Willards? But your family cares about what happens here more than if we just hired somebody out of college who didn't have that connection to the bank.
I've always maintained that the legacy of this bank is much bigger than one family.
Even though we've been a big part of it and maybe been the leadership here, there are so many people throughout the decades that have come into this bank every day with a servant's heart to try to serve the people that walk through the door and do kind of what your grandmother said, treat others the way you want to be treated. And as long as you remember that golden rule, we'll always be successful.
It's really rewarding to hear the stories of a customer who comes in and says, you know, your grandfather gave me my first loan. And so I've learned that the love really runs both ways. It's the staff to the customers, and it's the customers back to the staff. And I feel so lucky to be able to have that experience.
As a family, it doesn't get any better than that.
History is a superb author, writing twists of fate and flawless poetic symmetry. Remember how this story began? The minutes of the board's first meeting noted without flourish that S.E. Shockley was made chairman. Such plain words would become the opening line to yet another storied legacy.
One story that I can remember my dad telling me was him driving his grandfather, which would be S.E. Shockley, to the bank meetings. The meetings at that time were held in the evenings, and my dad drove Mr. S.E. Shockley's Model T Ford to the bank meetings. Subsequently, my grandfather, J.W. Shockley, served on the board of the Farmers Bank of Willards, followed by my father, Lewis W. Shockley. My father was always a businessman. He liked to be in the store, interacting with people that came in. He really enjoyed his affiliation with the bank, meeting with other businessmen, looking at loans, analyzing loans, and making loans in the community. After having my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my dad, but there are boys in my family, and I expected that if a family member were to replace my dad, it would be one of my brothers. I was very surprised that I was elected by that current board. My dad did ask if he could stay on another year and sit beside me on my first year. That was great, just to have the affirmation of such a long-term experienced director and someone who loved the bank. I was later told by one of the directors that they felt it was time to have a woman on the board. So for 25 years, I have served that role and thoroughly enjoyed it as my dad did. There is a picture here with my dad in it. It's a picture of all the board members sitting in the boardroom, beautiful room with a beautiful mural on the back. And this table, my dad sitting at the front of that table. And I remember going to many board meetings in that room as a young woman, the only woman, and one of about 6 stockholders that would go and attend the annual meetings. It's humbling, but very exciting. Quite an honor to be the 4th generation of a Shockley to be serving on the board of the Farmers Bank of Willards. My great-grandfather starting as the first chairman, and I presently serve as chairman.
Legacy isn't just about what we inherit. It's about what we choose to carry forward. Knowing we stand where our ancestors once stood gives that role deeper meaning, a sense of purpose. Perhaps a sense of purpose is the very thing that makes a 100-year legacy possible.
As I got on the board and I saw what the bank really did, my eyes were open to how much people depended on the bank to get loans that other banks just wouldn't make.
Banking is dominated by large multinational banks.
I didn't realize at the time how precious a community bank is to a community and how much it affects people's lives on a day-to-day basis. In fact, I don't think I understood until I've been here several years.
The concept of being able to walk into a local bank with your friends and family working there allows us to understand our customers better, and it allows us to allocate capital better.
As time went on and it got closer and he decided he was going to retire, then the question came, would you ever have any interest in serving? And it was hard because I've been practicing law for almost 20 years. I had 3 children, and to make that change of career at that time was a leap of faith. And it turns out that leap of faith was the right leap to take.
With so many global banking options today, it's easy to overlook the importance of a community bank, the benefits of keeping investment local, and the absolute necessity to keep that money circulating through the community, like a heart pumping blood to all parts of the body, to literally keep it alive.
The bottom line for me is we're here to help people realize their dreams. If people don't realize their dreams or can't realize their dreams because they can't buy a home, buy a car, buy a lot, fix up their home, then the community dies.
Fortunately, everyone in this century-long story seemed to understand the vital role they played. Without that sense of purpose, that belief in the potential of neighbors, communities don't grow. They fade. Purpose, it turns out, isn't just what keeps a legacy or even a mission going. It's what keeps everything going.
One of the things my grandfather used to say, I do remember this from even being 8 years old because he passed away when I was 8, you cannot travel the road to success without stopping and help others along the way. And so if we're going to make people successful in our local community, we have to stop and help them along the way. And if you just think of people and customers as a number, as a way to make money, then I think the bank would lose its identity, it would lose its culture. The culture here is now and always will be to be servants of the public and to help people on their road to success.
I absolutely feel that the founders of this bank would be very pleased. Not many organizations, not many banks have survived 100 years, and I'm pleased to be a part of that.
It's an honor to be a part of a 100-year company, and I hope the customers feel that too, and I hope they're proud of us because they've been the biggest part of this business, our customers.
If I was looking out 50 years into the future, my message would be congratulations. We are facing an uphill battle. At the community bank level, you have forces fighting against you at every level. You have new technology, new fintechs, you have the regulatory environment becoming increasingly burdensome. And in order for us to be successful, you have to recognize those challenges. You have to adapt. It's much easier to look at those challenges and just hit the sell button. That's not us. That's not what we want to do. our bank is committed to remaining independent.
Our decisions at the Farmers Bank of Willards has always been and continues to be a bank for the people. So decisions were made trying to keep that culture, trying to keep that philosophy of a community bank, a country bank in place the same as it was in 1925 when it first opened. We obviously have gone on into the computer world, but that culture still remains the same.
I didn't have the privilege of knowing my great-grandfather, S.E. Shockley, but I do think that he would be very pleased that I am now the chairman of the board of the Farmers Bank of Willards, which he started 100 years ago.
100 years ago, the Farmers Bank of Willards was founded in hope. It was built with honesty, hard work, integrity, and service to one another, enduring principles to stand through seasons of hardship and harvest alike. Through the years, it has touched countless lives, those who built, those who believed, and those who banked, co-writing their enduring legacy. Perhaps their unwavering mission of neighbor helping neighbor is found pleasing to God, who may grant His blessing for yet another 100 years.
My earliest memory of the bank is going in to see Miss Bonnie Elliott. I think she was at one of our Salisbury locations, and I remember her giving me lollipops.
When my sister and I would come into the bank, everything sort of stopped. And we got to go behind the counter. We got to go into the vault. We got to hold $20,000 in our hands. We got to see all the silver dollars and all the money that was in the vault. And it really makes an impression on you when you're a little kid.
I remember as a little girl, the Farmers Bank of Willards always had a Christmas party. I think it was held at the English Diner in Salisbury. And I'm one of 6 children, so Mother would dress all 3 girls and 3 boys up in our Sunday school best, and we would go to the Christmas party dinner, and there would always be a little gift.
My sister and I would run around the new bank that was built in 1966. I actually would hide from my parents in the dumbwaiter that was upstairs. The dumbwaiter was a small, cubby that went from upstairs to downstairs in the new bank. And I got in there and hid too long, and my sister batted me out. Yeah, I got a little trouble for that one.